Welcome to 100 Yards of Football. Today we got our NFL legend video. Otis Taylor, wide receiver, Kansas City Chiefs. If you like the video today, please comment and share it. I'm your host, Vincent Turner. I'd like to give special thanks to my producer today, the very talented Mr. Logan Landers. So if you like the video, please comment and share it. Today, it's all about Otis Taylor, former great of the Kansas City Chiefs. When you think about football players that's played this game at a high level, and you think about over the years and watching this game as I've done of my 63 years being on this earth, and I'm a guy that watched a lot of football in the mid-60s. There was a lot of great players playing during that time that I was really crazy about as a 9-year-old. From Gary Sayers to O.J. Simpson to Jim Brown to Homer Jones. Guys, and let me throw Bob Hayes in there. Guys that were explosive football players that when they took it to the house from 50 to 60 yards, you just went crazy. And I'm going to share something that's true today here on 100 Yards Football. People know I'm from the 901. Memphis, Tennessee is my hometown. And I was a diehard Kansas City Chiefs fan back in the day along with the Dallas Cowboys. But really, the first great football player that I really got crazy about was Otis Taylor. To me, when you look at players that's done a lot for the game, who set the tone, who set other players to come behind them and have great careers, Otis Taylor's at the top of the list at the wide receiver position. And that's why I don't understand some. When we look at all these great receivers that's in the Hall of Fame, from Terrell Owens to Jerry Rice, to Calvin Johnson, to Marvin Harrison Sr., to Randy Moss, to Chad Johnson, to Antonio Brown, nobody mentions Otis Taylor. Not even Charlie Joyner, who played in the SWAC, along with Mr. Otis Taylor, who played at Fairview. Nobody mentions Otis Taylor. Even Chris Carter, that went to Ohio State, who's now a Hall of Famer, played with the Minnesota Vikings and the Philadelphia Eagles. And I asked myself this question, why? Well, Otis Taylor passed last year at 80 years old, and nobody came out and said anything about him. None of these players, or how great a football player he set the tone. And you look at Otis Taylor, and I think back, as I just mentioned, when I was 9 years old, and I'm watching Super Bowl IV, and Otis Taylor catches that out from his teammate Lenny Dawson to take that thing 46 yards to the house, and he had stepped down the sideline. I was 9 years old, and I was jumping up and down, and I said to myself, that's going to be my man, and that's going to be my favorite football player for the rest of my life. Those words haven't changed. When you look at overall, and it's been some great players that's played this game. As I just mentioned, Jim Brown, Walter Payton, Lynn Barney, Eric Dickerson, Mike Singletary, Jerry Rice. I'm just throwing his name back out there. Today, Otis Taylor is still my favorite football player because he was the first big-body wide receiver that played the game at a high level, who actually was 6'3", 215 pounds, that was catching deep passes and making the wide receiver position a priority. Because think back in the 60s, they were not throwing the football. They were running the football. And for him to be in the Hall of Fame of this moment is just disheartening to me. Super Bowl champion, a two-time AFL champion, an AFL championship MVP in 1969, first team All-AFL in 1966, two-time Pro Bowler, led the NFL receiving yards in 1971, over 410 receptions, 7,306 yards, 57 touchdowns, and a three-time Pro Bowler. Even though his stats are not really there, but when you look at what he done at that time, that's A+ at a high level. And then I look at other players that's in the Hall of Fame. Since the Hall of Fame, I want to understand this is based on stats. Well, I went and looked up Joe Namath's stats, who is a Super Bowl champion, guaranteed that victory with the New York Jets defeating the Baltimore Colts. Joe Namath threw for 2,766 yards. 173 touchdowns for 220 interceptions. He's in the Hall of Fame based off that guarantee that he gave when the New York Jets upset the Baltimore Colts in their 1969 Super Bowl. And then I look at Troy Aikman of the Dallas Cowboys. Troy has 3 Super Bowl championships. No question about it. His numbers, only 32,942 passing yards, 165 touchdowns, and 141 interceptions. And I said to myself, stats are not all that great, but he's a Super Bowl champion. What's the difference than Otis Taylor than these two gentlemen? And I get to saying, why? The question again, why Otis Taylor is not in the Hall of Fame? Terrell Owens didn't win a Super Bowl. Kevin Johnson didn't win the Super Bowl. Chris Carter didn't win a Super Bowl. And Randy Moss didn't win a Super Bowl, but they had outstanding numbers. But the whole irony of this conversation that I'm presenting today is that Otis Taylor set the tone for all the old receivers. For y'all have a place in the National Football League. And he's a Super Bowl champion. And I take from this, Otis Taylor played at Prairie View University, a SWAC school. Let's be honest, the NFL didn't want him at first. He signed with the AFL, the Kansas City Chiefs. Then the merger happened. Then we saw what type of player he was once he got to the NFL. And you think about the explosiveness and him being able to get up and get the ball at a receiver height. And then in 1966, he averaged almost 22 yards a catch. When I look at all these great receivers that I've mentioned, from Moss to Carter to Owens to Johnson, I don't think neither one of them averaged 22 yards a catch. But Otis Taylor did it in 66 when they weren't even throwing the football. Then going back to Prairie View, look how he set the tone for all those great players at Prairie View, from Sam Adams to Allen Aldridge to Tyler Braxton to Clem Daniels to Kenny Houston, Jim Lee Hunt, Jim Kearney, and Jim Mitchell. And Kenny Houston said, you can go back and look on a video that Kenny Houston did about Otis Taylor. By far, he's the best football player I played against at that position. And his coach at the time when he was at Prairie View was Billy Nix, legendary coach from Prairie View University, born in Griffin, Georgia. And today I'm broadcasting from Douglasville, Georgia, which is not far from Griffin, which is almost an hour and a half. And Billy Nix told the National Football League and told everybody before Otis Taylor comes in and plays at a high level in the professional league, he's going to be the best receiver that's going to ever play in the National Football League. I take that real seriously and with honor. Billy Nix, being from Griffin, Georgia, should get some stamps for that because there's something in the water in Griffin. Tim Beckman, Charlie Clemens, Willie Gault, Darren Hancock, Rayfield Wright, Jesse Tuggle, and Josh Pace. You talk about great players, and I could sit here for hours talking about how great that young man was with the Kansas City Chiefs on the screen. But today, while I'm doing this video, I want to give homage because if I had a vote in the Hall of Fame, Otis Taylor would have been a first ballot. And I made a pact to myself, long as I'm on this platform here today at 100 Yards Football, every year at this time, I don't care if I'm 63, I don't care if I'm 83. If I'm able to talk, I'm always going to do a video on Otis Taylor and give him his flowers. And I hope that his family run across this video because Otis Taylor is no doubt about it was my favorite football player back then. Playing on that outstanding Kansas City Chiefs football team that won the Super Bowl with all those Hall of Famers, from Len Dawson to Emmett Thomas to Buck Buchanan to Bobby Bell to Willie Lanier to Jim Lynch to Johnny Robinson. It's amazing that Otis Taylor is not in the Hall of Fame because he might have been the most important piece of that Super Bowl 14. And then think about all the other talent that was on that squad. Frank Pitts, Robert Holmes, Ed Buddy, Curly Cup, and a very talented head football coach with a lot of swag and a lot of energy, Hank Stram. And I just don't understand what the NFL Hall of Fame is thinking about not having this player in who played 10 years, Mr. Otis Taylor, the first original super athletic elite wide receiver that played in the National Football League at a Prairie View University by way of the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't have to say nothing about his skill set because we know what his skill set was like. Fast, athletic, outstanding route runner, tremendous yards after a catch receiver, and a guy that was very strong and a willing blocker. And going back to 1970 in the playoffs when the Chiefs won Super Bowl IV, think about they beat the New York Jets that year 13-6. And that Jets team was coming off a Super Bowl win with Joe Namath guarantee. And the Jets team had Matt Snell, Don Maynard, Winston Hill, Verlin Biggs, Gary Freeman, and Randy Beverly. Then it went on the next week and took care of the Raiders. Darryl LaMonica, Ken Stabler as a backup, Hewitt Dixon, Charlie Smith, Warren Wells, Fred Biletnikoff, Gene Upshaw, Art Snell, Willie Brown, George Atkinson, and Ben Davidson. In those 2 playoff games, Otis Taylor was the best player on the field. And then in the Super Bowl, and I believe the Vikings were, a 10-point favorite. And think about the Vikings at that time was very unbeatable in a lot of people's eyes, including the media. They had Joe Cap, Oscar Reed from my hometown, the 901, Bill Brown, Dave Osborne, Gene Washington, Jim Marshall, the great Alan Page, Gary Lawson, Paul Krause, Lonnie Warwick, and the great Carl Eller. And that gentleman right there had that 46-yard touchdown reception and took the Chiefs to a Super Bowl championship and ended up playing 10 years with the same team and becoming one of the greatest receivers in the game. And we want to say it was his stats, but no, not really. I think it was because Otis Taylor came at a time that people didn't really respect the wide receiver position and didn't know how athletic and how good he was. But you know what? Today, that's what my job is. I love that football player. I love him not only as a player, but as a man. He did a lot in the Kansas City, Missouri community. Just ask his former teammate who's still living, Bobby Bell, how much he did for the kids and the youth in Kansas City. Never complained about not being in the Hall of Fame. And when he passed last year, I shared a tear for Otis Taylor and his family. It's been a lot of great football players I've mentioned on this platform that's played this game at a high level, that's represented at a high level. From Tom Brady to Dick Butkus to John Elway to Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Roger Craig, Lynn Barney, Emmitt Smith, Walter Payton. Man, I can go on and on. L.C. Greenwood, Mel Blount, Lynn Swann, Jerome Bettis, Super Bowl champions, Darrelle Revis, Ty Law. The list goes on and on. If I could, I could name 100 players today. And then you look at it today, the Kansas City Chiefs have won 3 Super Bowls under probably, maybe the next greatest player that's played this game in Patrick Mahomes. But nobody mentioned Otis Taylor. What are we doing out here in the media? What are we doing out here in the world? But today, I'm going to give my love and my respect, in my opinion, the greatest receiver that played this game out of Houston, Texas, Worthy High School, the great Otis Taylor. Y'all be blessed here on 100 Yards of Football. I want to give special thanks to my producer, Mr. Logan Landers, for making it happen today. Otis Taylor, let's get it up. Let's get this energy up and get him in the Hall of Fame next year in the 2024 class. Y'all be blessed here on 100 Yards of Football.